I should have poured a double bourbon straight into my morning mug the exact moment Thorne strutted into Apexion Global Logistics, like he had personally patented corporate capitalism. He waltzed through the revolving glass doors, wearing that sleek, predatory Wall Street grin they hand out alongside every overpriced Master of Business Administration degree. When the executive elevator chime rang on the ground lobby level, there he was already spouting hollow buzzwords about optimizing cross-functional synergy and disruptive operational leverage to the receptionist, who looked like she would rather chew broken glass than listen to another second of his corporate pitch. I stood quietly near the back corner of the elevator bank, holding my bitter black coffee like a holy relic. He did not notice me standing there in my tailored gray wool suit. Of course he did not. Young, fast-tracked executives like Chandler never noticed the veteran operational architects who built the structural foundations of the business until the entire ceiling collapses directly onto their polished Italian leather shoes. The elevator ride up to the 34th floor felt like a corporate hostage negotiation. Chandler held the entire cabin captive with his booming, unearned confidence. He boasted endlessly about being a ruthless fanatic of lean operations, completely oblivious to the undeniable reality that every senior engineer, supply chain director, and regional operations manager jammed into that metal box had spent the last decade and a half keeping this $65 million conglomerate profitable, while Chandler was still collecting rejection letters from second-tier private equity firms in Scottsdale. Then came the punchline that made my jaw tighten so hard my molars ached. "Just wait until I streamline the legacy staff," he chuckled, with all the smug, ignorant grace of a toddler waving a lit match near an open propane valve. That was me he was referencing directly. At 54 years old, with 16 continuous years of tenure as Senior Director of Operations and Logistics, I was the undisputed bedrock of Apexion's entire infrastructure. 16 years ago, when I first joined Apexion Global Logistics, the company was operating out of 3 cramped regional warehouses with a chaotic paper-based tracking system. Over the course of nearly 2 decades, I had designed, built, and perfected our automated cross-docking distribution network from scratch. I had written the original algorithms for our freight routing software, negotiated key vendor service level agreements across 4 continents, and personally secured our regulatory transport licenses. Every single node in our $65 million supply chain bore my intellectual imprint. But to a 31-year-old MBA hire parachuted in by private equity investors, 16 years of sweat equity was not an asset. It was merely an expensive line item waiting to be sliced. By the time the elevator doors slid open on the executive suite, Chandler had already name-dropped 3 top-tier management consulting firms, botched the basic pronunciation of proprietary logistics terminology, and called our chief financial officer by the wrong first name twice. I stepped out first, took a long sip of lukewarm coffee, and exhaled slowly through my nose like an old bull preparing for slaughter. I had seen plenty of fast-talking ladder climbers come and go during my career, but what I did not anticipate was the cold, surgical efficiency with which our newly appointed Chief Operating Officer, Victoria Vance, reassigned my core operational authority before the lunch hour arrived. "We are evolving your strategic mandate," Vance declared from behind her massive obsidian desk, not even bothering to look up from her tablet screen. "We see you moving into an advisory capacity, focused on long-term historical oversight and institutional continuity." It was textbook corporate doublespeak for "please pack your files and step aside quietly while the new kid takes full credit for your life's work." I smiled, nodded politely like a seasoned diplomat, and thanked her for the clarity. Then I walked back to my spacious corner office, shut the heavy mahogany door, and pulled out a fresh manila folder. I labeled it Chandler Thorne Paper Trail. I slid in a printed email thread I had been blind copied on 2 hours prior, which showed Chandler requesting administrative ownership over my proprietary operational databases. That was the exact moment I stopped using cloud drives and started using my office laser printer like it owed me money. Chandler moved with aggressive, unearned speed over the subsequent week. Within 8 business days, my name was systematically purged from every strategic alignment thread and executive committee distribution list I had originally created. My daily calendar, once packed with multi-million-dollar vendor negotiations and international supply chain reviews, became cleaner and emptier than Chandler's hollow resume. He reassigned 2 of my sharpest senior logistics analysts, Gavin and Nolan, real technical talents whom I had personally recruited and mentored for 6 years, straight to his own reporting structure. He glibly informed them they would experience far greater upward visibility under his dynamic leadership. They looked utterly shell-shocked as they packed their desks. Gavin mouthed a quiet apology to me across the hallway as he carried his monitors away. I did not raise a public fuss. I did not lodge a formal complaint with human resources. Instead, I plugged an encrypted external hard drive into my secure terminal and began systematically backing up 16 years of proprietary supply chain blueprints, global routing algorithms, vendor compliance archives, and confidential investor summaries. I categorized every file by deal stage, timestamping every digital signature and version history down to the exact second. Arrogant executives always assume revenge is a loud, emotional spectacle. Mine was a quiet, meticulous audit executed 1 kilobyte at a time. On Thursday morning, Chandler swaggered into our executive operations briefing, carrying a glossy presentation deck he clearly had not authored himself. Every sentence he uttered carried the oily sheen of a salesman who honestly believes speed can permanently replace structural substance. He openly described my 16-year operational framework as foundational yet hopelessly dated in front of 20 junior staffers and regional directors. "You laid the basic bricks, Vance." Chandler smirked across the long glass table, pointing a laser pointer at my original network diagram. "Now my team is going to build the skyscraper." I stared directly into his eyes, my expression perfectly calm. Then I closed my leather notebook, turned off my desk lamp, and sat alone in the quiet dark of my office for 20 solid minutes, breathing slowly through my teeth. Legacy staff, he had called me. I decided right then and there to show him precisely what 16 years of legal and operational legacy actually meant. The corporate atmosphere at Apexion had shifted dramatically in recent months, but I remained steadfast. In corporate America, young executives often mistake quiet competence for weakness. Chandler Thorne believed that because I did not aggressively interrupt people in meetings or post inspirational platitudes on social media, my position was fragile. He failed to comprehend that true power in a $65 million logistics conglomerate does not rest in flashy presentation decks. It resides in the intricate, unseen web of vendor contracts, custom database queries, and regulatory clearances that keep freight moving smoothly across oceans and borders every hour of the day. For 16 years, I had quietly managed those exact mechanisms, ensuring that while executives collected bonuses, the operational engine never skipped a beat. When a man spends decades mastering the intricate mechanics of an industry, he does not panic when a novice attempts to usurp his title. He simply waits for the novice to confront reality. Deep operational knowledge creates an invisible armor that no superficial title or corporate mandate can dismantle. Veteran leadership endures because it is grounded in unassailable technical truth. The corporate erasure accelerated rapidly by the following Monday morning. One by one, my recurring executive calendar invitations vanished like mist under an intense summer sun. First went the Thursday morning financial risk assessments, then the global vendor readiness huddles, the very operational pillars I had created from scratch 6 years ago. Chandler revoked my administrative visibility line by line, as though he were chiseling my name off a granite monument. Then came the definitive strike. When I logged into our enterprise repository to update our $65 million acquisition blueprint, a bright red banner flashed across my monitor. Access denied. You do not possess the required security credentials to view or edit this directory. I sent a polite, formal inquiry to its support. The reply came back 40 minutes later, written in the cowardly, passive voice of corporate compliance. Security protocols for strategic acquisition directories have been updated per the direct written instruction of Vice President Thorne. No warning, no justification. I had been digitally banished from my own intellectual property by a 31-year-old VP in a tailored suit. Chandler lacked the intestinal fortitude to address me directly in my office. Instead, he operated in the shadows, quietly looping my former analysts into high-stakes acquisition meetings regarding our upcoming merger with parent private equity Titan Capital. Late Tuesday afternoon, I caught my former senior analyst Gavin in the break room. Gavin was nervously pacing in front of the microwave, desperately rehearsing a slide on international tariff risk mitigation. Complex technical framework I had spent 14 months perfecting. When he noticed me standing near the coffee machine, he flinched as if caught stealing company property. Vice President Thorne wants the presentation streamlined. Gavin stammered, staring down at his shoes. He said centralized authority is mandatory for the Titan Capital due diligence audit. I placed a calm hand on Gavin's shoulder, told him not to worry, and reminded him to remember who originally taught him how to analyze international tariff structures. That night, I stayed in the office long past 9 in the evening. The executive floor was dead silent save for the rhythmic hum of the floor buffer on the lobby level below. I unlocked my heavy steel fireproof filing cabinet and pulled out 3 thick leather binders containing legal contracts, regulatory filings, and version-controlled architectural schematics dating back 16 years. I did not merely hold access to the operational skeleton of Apexion Global Logistics. I had engineered every joint, bolt, and load-bearing beam of the company's $65 million supply chain infrastructure. By 11:45 that night, fueled by cold black coffee, I had printed out a 284-page proprietary vendor integration draft that still bore my digital initials in the lower footer of every single page. As the heavy laser printer whined under the heavy workload, I ran my thumb over the warm paper. I was not acting out of petty anger or wounded pride. I was systematically constructing an unassailable evidentiary vault. Chandler believed he was deleting my career, but in reality, he was forcing me to shift my authority into an untouchable legal domain. And then I remembered Everett Ross. Everett was the 62-year-old lead board director at Titan Capital, the parent firm orchestrating the $65 million acquisition. 8 years prior, during a catastrophic supply chain breakdown in East Asia that threatened to wipe out $30 million in regional revenue, Everett and I had spent 72 continuous hours in a war room restructuring vendor contracts to save the company from bankruptcy. Before he departed, Everett had looked me straight in the eye and said, "Vance, you are the only operational mind in this entire conglomerate I trust with 8-figure capital." I pulled out a secure, non-corporate laptop and logged into an encrypted private email address we had established years ago for confidential board communications. I drafted a brief, precise message to Everett Ross. Subject: Apexion Operational Architecture and Due Diligence Continuity. Body: Everett, looping back on archival logistics pipelines per original ownership agreements. I am maintaining master version logs to ensure compliance with federal intellectual property and continuity standards during the upcoming Titan Capital audit. Materials available upon legal request. Vance. I read the message 3 times to ensure complete professional detachment. No emotional whining, no personal attacks against Chandler, no traceable company network telemetry. Just enough legal clarity to alert a seasoned board director. I hit send and watched the screen refresh. Chandler possessed the keys to the front door, but I held the registered blueprints, the master deeds, and the legal title to the foundation. During my 16 years at Apexion, I had witnessed 3 separate corporate restructurings, but none had been as recklessly executed as Chandler's takeover attempt. A proper operational transition requires meticulous auditing, risk assessment, and legal cross-referencing. Chandler, however, operated on pure ego and superficial speed. He cut corners on compliance, ignored international trade regulations, and severed communication channels with veteran warehouse managers who had kept our shipping lanes open for a decade. He genuinely believed that corporate authority could be established by simply changing administrative rights on SharePoint and excluding senior leaders from email threads. He had no understanding of the deep operational dependencies that anchored our business. As I reviewed the archival files in my office late at night, I realized that my role was no longer just protecting my personal career, but safeguarding the entire enterprise from gross managerial incompetence. Real leadership means anticipating systemic failures before they destroy value, protecting both staff and shareholders from hubris. The reply from Everett Ross arrived at 2:13 in the morning. At that quiet hour, when even the automated enterprise monitoring tools ran silently, my private screen illuminated with a single notification. There was no casual small talk, only an attached encrypted document titled Project Titan Executive Continuity Clause, Draft Version 4, accompanied by a short note. They kept your foundational architecture in the master filing. Thought you should review page 4, paragraph 8. I decrypted the file using our legacy security passphrase from the 2016 expansion. The document opened cleanly. There, embedded in standard 12-point Times New Roman font, was my exact operational language. Section 8, Operational Transition and Leadership Delegation. Paragraph 8 stated that all integration protocols must proceed under pre-existing executive oversight. I took a slow breath and focused on the legal vulnerabilities Chandler had created by trying to erase me. Chandler had violated basic federal intellectual property protections under Title 17, United States Code, Section 106, which governs exclusive rights in copyrighted technical blueprints, as well as Title 35, United States Code, Section 271, regarding proprietary operational process infringement. Furthermore, by abruptly reassigning key personnel without proper corporate disclosures, the executive team had exposed Apexion to regulatory noncompliance under the Worker Adjustment and Retraining Notification Act. Codified at Title 29, United States Code, Section 2101, not to mention a severe breach of fiduciary duty and the illegal dissipation of corporate assets. I opened the contract draft, carefully highlighted Section 8, Paragraph 8b, and added a precise ironclad legal clause. In the event of any internal dispute regarding operational authority, historical authorship, or due diligence accuracy prior to closing, full executive transition authority and operational command shall immediately and automatically revert to the most tenured senior director of operations. This was not a desperate bid for power. It was an unassailable legal trap. Chandler wanted public prestige and board applause, but I cared only about binding legal outcomes. I removed all author metadata from the PDF document, flattened the file layer structure to prevent digital tampering, re-encrypted the package, and transmitted it back to Everett's private server. No dramatic farewell, no signature block, just a clean legal instrument returned to its sender. The following morning, Chandler strode into the weekly company-wide town hall, looking like a victorious general celebrating a campaign he had never fought. Clad in a custom-tailored Navy suit, he projected a polished deck onto the main wall. Acquisition Alignment, Operational Optimization, by Vice President Chandler Thorne, the title slide proclaimed in bold gold lettering. He walked the room with a wireless microphone, presenting my 14 months of hard-won logistical architecture as his own brilliant creation. He had altered the color schemes and stripped my name from the title blocks, but every single risk matrix, vendor tiering index, and cost reduction algorithm was unmistakably mine. As Chandler boasted about his visionary leadership to the applauding audience, so Victoria Vance sat in the front row nodding in approval. I sat in the back row, leaning comfortably against the wall, tapping a silver pen against my leather notebook. I did not interrupt him. I did not demand credit. I simply watched a 31-year-old amateur dig his own professional grave in front of 70 witnesses. Chandler believed the battle was being fought on PowerPoint slides, completely unaware that the real war had already been decided in 12-point font on page 4 of a federal acquisition contract. That night, as I sat alone at my home workspace reviewing the encrypted contract drafts from Everett Ross, I marveled at the sheer short-sightedness of arrogant managers. Chandler was so blinded by his desire to impress the board of directors that he never bothered to inspect the legal fine print of the acquisition documents he was signing. He assumed that because CEO Victoria Vance supported him, his position was invulnerable. But in private equity, loyalty is entirely conditional upon risk management and legal compliance. By attempting to appropriate my copyrighted logistics framework, Chandler had transformed a standard corporate acquisition into a legal landmine. I did not have to create new conflicts. I simply had to ensure that federal compliance standards and historical authorship records were strictly enforced under statutory guidelines. Legal clarity is the ultimate equalizer in high-stakes corporate disputes, turning unearned confidence into undeniable liability. The atmosphere inside the 34th floor executive boardroom on Friday morning was suffocatingly tense. The air smelled of stale espresso, expensive leather, and the quiet desperation of corporate executives trying to justify their multi-million-dollar salaries. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city skyline was cloaked in gray morning mist. I took a seat along the far perimeter wall, positioned intentionally away from the central mahogany conference table, right between a decorative potted plant and a silent teleconferencing hub. I brought no laptop, no flashy digital tablet, and no colorful presentation slides. I sat calmly with my arms folded, carrying only a single matte black business card tucked neatly inside my jacket pocket and a plain manila folder resting on my lap. Across the room, Chandler Thorne was in full theatrical performance mode. He paced back and forth across the plush carpet, gesturing wildly at a slide deck that had been cobbled together by junior staffers. We have fully streamlined the operational architecture through vertical integration, Chandler declared loudly, flashing a practiced smile at Titan Capital's due diligence team. The $65 million acquisition model is completely locked. Transition authority is fully centralized under my office. At the head of the table sat Titan Capital's chief legal counsel, Claire Danforth, a 42-year-old attorney known across the private equity sector for her terrifying legal precision. Beside her sat Everett Ross, observing the room with steady, unreadable gray eyes. Claire turned a page in her thick leather-bound dossier, stopped, and tapped her pen against a specific paragraph. "I have a critical compliance query regarding Section 8. Paragraph 8B, Claire said, her calm voice instantly cutting through Chandler's loud performance. The language specifies an automatic reversion of operational authority to the most tenured senior operations lead upon any dispute over historical authorship or architectural integrity. I need clarification on who holds that formal designation." Chandler dismissed her question with a wave of his hand, chuckling condescendingly. "That is merely standard boilerplate language, Miss Danforth. It has zero bearing on the buyer's rights. All operational command routes directly through my desk as vice president. Corporate legal has already vetted the draft." Claire Danforth did not smile. She raised one eyebrow and looked directly at Chandler with cold legal scrutiny. Chandler, feeling his authority challenged in front of the board, bristled visible anger. He stepped closer to the head of the table, leaned over Claire's chair, and raised his voice with arrogant indignation. "Look, Miss Danforth, do you even know who I am? I was brought in specifically by COO Vance to lead this $65 million transition." The entire boardroom froze. Co-Victoria Vance stiffened in her chair. Junior analysts stopped typing. The silence was so sudden and absolute that you could hear the soft whir of the overhead air filtration unit. Chandler stood there, chest puffed out, completely unaware that he had just committed career suicide in front of the lead buyers. I did not say a word. I slowly stood up from my chair by the wall, unbuttoned my suit jacket, and walked calmly toward the mahogany table. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my matte black business card, and slid it smoothly across the polished wood directly to Claire Danforth. Claire picked up the card, read the crisp white lettering, Vance Miller, Senior Director of Operations and Logistics, and immediately scanned the embedded digital verification code printed on the reverse side. She looked up at Everett Ross. Everett did not blink. A subtle, sharp smirk appeared at the corner of his mouth. "Actually, son," Everett Ross said, his voice echoing with absolute authority as he looked Chandler dead in the eye. "Do you have any idea who he is?" Standing near the perimeter wall of the executive boardroom, I observed the subtle shifts in body language among the board members. Claire Danforth was not an attorney who could be swayed by empty buzzwords or theatrical confidence. She was a seasoned legal strategist who spent her career dissecting corporate filings for hidden liabilities. Chandler's loud, condescending tone when questioned about Section 8, Paragraph 8b, was the exact moment his facade fractured completely, when an executive resorts to shouting, "Do you know who I am?" In a room full of senior investors, it is a clear admission that they have run out of facts, logic, and authority. In that singular moment, every senior leader in the room recognized the profound difference between superficial management and true operational leadership. Real authority is quiet, patient, and immutable, anchored by years of proven results rather than fragile bluster. Chandler Thorne blinked rapidly, his confident posture instantly evaporating. His mouth opened to speak, but no sound emerged. For the first time since he had stepped foot inside Apexion Global Logistics, the 31-year-old vice president was utterly speechless. Claire Danforth opened a red-tabbed annex folder and laid 3 printed documents side by side on the conference table. Her voice was sharp and surgical as she addressed the room. Mr. Miller's digital signature and master encryption keys are permanently embedded into every foundational algorithm, vendor contract, and tariff structure within this $65 million filing, dating back 16 years. Furthermore, version control metadata proves that the presentation deck Vice President Thorne presented this morning was copied directly from Mr. Miller's protected work files 3 weeks ago. Claire looked directly at COO Victoria Vance. Under Title 17, United States Code, Section 106, and Title 35, United States Code, Section 271, presenting unauthorized proprietary architecture during a federal acquisition audit constitutes willful intellectual property infringement. Additionally, attempting to strip Mr. Miller's operational oversight without board authorization represents a direct breach of fiduciary duty and exposes Apexion to catastrophic liability under the Warren Act, Title 29, United States Code, Section 2101. Victoria Vance turned pale, her hands trembling slightly as she looked down at the contract draft. Chandler scrambled forward, grabbing the edge of the table. "Wait! This is an outrageous misunderstanding. You cannot alter transition command mid-meeting. I routed the entire strategy through my office." Everett Ross stood up slowly, commanding total control of the room. "Mr. Thorne, sit down and remain quiet," Everett ordered in a tone that allowed zero argument. Titan Capital is investing $65 million in operational stability and legal integrity, not in unearned arrogance and plagiarized slide decks. Claire Danforth closed her dossier with a firm, decisive thud. Pursuant to Section 8, Paragraph 8b of the Executed Acquisition Agreement, full operational command, transition oversight, and strategic integration authority for this transaction are officially assigned to Mr. Vance Miller, effective immediately. Victoria Vance immediately stood up, walked behind Chandler's chair, and silently confiscated his enterprise access card and corporate tablet. She offered him a short, cold nod toward the exit doors. "Your executive services are terminated, Mr. Thorne. Please pack your personal belongings and leave the premises immediately." Chandler stood frozen in shock. He looked around the long mahogany table, searching desperately for a single ally. But no one met his gaze. The junior analysts looked away, the chief financial officer studied his fingernails, and the board members focused entirely on their files. Chandler slowly turned, his shoulders sagging inside his expensive suit, and walked out of the boardroom. The heavy glass doors clicked shut behind him, closing the chapter on his short, arrogant career. Everett Ross walked over to me, extending a warm hand. "Vance, on behalf of the board of directors at Titan Capital, we would be honored if you would accept the appointment to chew the strategic appointment as chairman of the Strategic Committee, reporting directly to the board with full executive oversight." I took Everett's hand, shook it firmly, and smiled. Not with loud triumph, but with the quiet satisfaction of a man who had built something real and defended it with absolute legal precision. True corporate power does not require loud shouting or flashy titles. It requires unyielding documentation, ironclad integrity, and the patience to let arrogant men destroy themselves while you quietly hold the master blueprints. As Chandler walked out of the boardroom for the final time, the silence that settled over the executive suite was profound. The remaining directors and junior staff quickly returned to their notes, recognizing that the balance of power had restored itself to solid ground. In the end, corporate justice was delivered not through public screaming matches or dramatic confrontations, but through the calm application of federal intellectual property laws, clear documentation, and ironclad legal contracts. As I accepted the appointment from Everett Ross to lead the Strategic Integration Committee, I knew that the foundation I had spent 16 years building was once again secure, protected by truth, tenure, and undeniable legal ownership. Operational legacy is not something that can be stolen in a slide deck. It is forged through years of unwavering dedication, technical precision, and absolute integrity. When the dust settles, experience always prevails over temporary ambition. In the weeks that followed, the transition moved forward with absolute precision and stability. I reinstated Gavin and Nolan to senior leadership positions within the operational department, ensuring their technical talents were properly recognized, elevated, and rewarded. With Titan Capital's full institutional backing, we expanded our automated distribution network to handle international freight across 6 new major global shipping hubs. Chandler Thorne tried to find another executive post in Scottsdale, but word of his severe legal missteps, intellectual property violations, and boardroom outburst had preceded him across the industry. In high-stakes business, personal reputation is everything, and once an executive demonstrates that they value personal ego over legal compliance and technical truth, no reputable private equity firm will ever entrust them with capital. As for me, I continue to walk through the revolving doors of Apexion Global Logistics every morning at 7, holding my bitter black coffee, quietly steering the company toward greater heights.